Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman. So we are greatly honored to have Professor Christine on with us, who is a professor of sociology of religion at the Center of Peace and Security at Coventry University. Now, she has published widely on religion in higher education and religion and gender, and conducted many externally funded research projects on these topics. Recent publications include the journal article of University Chaplaincy in relational presence and also building bridges or holy herds. But we are particularly interested, and this event addresses the research she's conducted on interfaith learning in Muslim and Christian higher education colleges. In, that Islamic College was um, lucky enough to participate in this. This lecture will present findings from the research project conducted by researchers, including the professor at Coventry University Center for Peace and Security, based on the interfaith learning opportunities and activities within the religious higher education colleges in Britain. The research was based on a quantitative research survey taken with 437 students at 58 colleges, 49 Christian and 9 Muslim, and interview-based case studies carried out at 2 Muslim and 2 Christian colleges, with 34 interviews conducted, spanning the UK Christian and Muslim college sector. The project seeks aim to answer two questions: what role do Christians and Muslim higher education colleges play in student interfaith learning and development, and how does student interfaith learning develop during their studies at the Christian and Muslim higher education colleges? So we've invited Professor on to present findings and recommendations for future interfaith learning in the religious higher education and contemporary Britain, and we are honored to have her here. So I'll give the platform now to you and leave you to deliver your talk. Um, if I could ask for questions to be carried out at the end, if it's possible, so that we have ample time to ask any questions you want to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the kind invitation. It's wonderful to be able to share some of this research. There's an echo on the screen. Does somebody? Oh, it's gone now. That's brilliant. Okay, so yes, as Dr. Mesbai said, I did this research with several other colleagues who you may have come across, Professor Saria Sharuvil-Contractor, Dr. Lucy Peacock, and Dr. Hafsa Iqbal, who is at the Markfield Institute, and Lucy is at the Wolf Institute. Saria is in Coventry working with me. So this is a joint project, but I led the team to do this. So this is an important topic because, well, many reasons that you will know. It's a difficult time at the moment for interfaith relations. For example, with the Israel-Palestine conflict, with the higher education sector having financial challenges, and then also new legislation on freedom of speech in higher education. So helping students, who are of course tomorrow's religious leaders, to navigate interfaith relations at this time is vital. But we think we've come up with some exciting answers to the question of how to do interfaith well in religious colleges. Next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. So this is our lovely report. We have just published this report, and it's available to download for free on our project website. So the link is there on the slide, but I can put it in the chat afterwards as well. And we're very grateful to our funders, the Sahali Stewart Trust and West Hill Endowment, for supporting the project and supporting its dissemination at events like this. Next slide, please. So if you click it 4 times, you will be able to see the aims for the project.
I think it's coming. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, it's fine. There's always a bit of a delay. That's absolutely fine. I will talk you through them. So the project started in 2023, and by religious colleges, we understand them as being colleges with a religious foundation or ethos that are providing level 4 and above educational qualifications. Those colleges often have clear pathways to religious leadership, but also include other courses. And we focus in the project in the largest part of the sector, so Christian and Muslim colleges. So there are 1 or 2 Jewish colleges, but we did not include those. So these were the 4 aims, as you can see here. But overall, we wanted to know, how can we create positive college environments for student engagement across religion and worldview different? So the 4 aims were, firstly, how do these college students approach religion and worldview difference in terms of attitudes and behaviour? How do those attitudes and behaviour change during their time at the colleges? How do different aspects of college life affect their interfaith learning? And what are these implications of this for the future of work in colleges and in interfaith organisations? Next slide, please. So we did 2 surveys of students. We got 260 responses for the first survey and 202 for the second survey. That was across 1 academic year. And we distributed the survey via colleges, so generally via an email to principals, sometimes other senior staff. And we did 4 case studies, as Dr. Mesbah mentioned, so 2 in Muslim colleges and 2 in Christian colleges. One of the Muslim colleges was Sunni, the other one was Shia. One Christian college was Anglican. It was training candidates for ordained ministry in the Church of England. And the other was evangelical, running theology and other degree courses. And in each college we visited, we interviewed at least 5 students and 3 staff. And we're very, very grateful, although I'm not naming the 4 colleges today, we're very, very grateful for the support that they gave in doing things like setting up interviews and recommending students and staff that we could contact to speak to. We had a very, very positive experience in all of our visits and met some wonderful people. Next slide, please. So for the survey, please can you click a second time and then you will see the text as well. Yes, that's perfect. So we got in total 462 replies. Now, only 2 were from students taking both only 25 were from students taking both surveys. So whereas originally we thought we will survey the students at the beginning and the end of the year and see how they've changed. That proved not possible because only 25 students did both surveys. So instead, we focused on the 437 as one group, and we used the most recent response. So for those 25, it would have been the spring term response 2024. Now, to give you some information about demographics, half of them said they were training to be a religious leader, such as an imam, a priest, or a chaplain. 35% were studying for another reason, and the rest, 14%, were unsure. Only, well, I shouldn't say only, actually, it's a fair number, I think. Just under half study in college but don't live there. So 49% were in college but didn't live there, so they were commuting to the college. And the others were split relatively evenly between people who studied and lived at the college, so that was 25%. or those who studied online, which was 27%. So the largest group are going to college but not living there. Just over half were studying full-time, so 53%. And the average age is really, really interesting because here it's different between Christian and Muslim colleges. The average age was 41 years, but Muslim college students were younger with an average age of 30, whereas for the Christians, the average age was 43. So that's 13 years younger. And we had more female respondents as well than male, particularly in Muslim colleges. In terms of ethnicity, over 80% of students in Christian colleges were white and 70% in Muslim colleges were Asian, but there were people from a range of ethnic groups in both types of college. Next slide, please. Now, did students arrive at college expecting to engage in interfaith? Well, mostly they did. So students arrived at college with interfaith experience and they expect interfaith opportunities at college. So, for example, more than 2/3 of students expected their college to be welcoming to those of diverse ethnic and cultural identities and religious and non-religious perspectives. 5 to 6 in 10 expected the college to offer opportunities to get to know students of other religious and non-religious perspectives and to offer education opportunities to learn about the different religious traditions in the world. And around 1/3 expected the opportunity to join an interfaith group or event or to do volunteer work with students of diverse religious and non-religious perspectives. So there's an appetite for engaging with diversity, including religious diversity. Next slide, please. Now, let me talk to you about students' interfaith attitudes. Now, we use a conceptual framework and survey measures from an American study. Alyssa Rockenbach and Matt Mayhew's Interfaith Diversity Experiences and Attitudes Longitudinal Survey. So that's a bit of a mouthful. It's called IDEALS for short. And they designed this survey probably about 10 years ago now as a way of measuring interfaith learning, and it's become quite influential in the USA. So if you look up their names and write IDEALS study, you will find it. And this is a reference to their 2021 article on this. So to measure students' interfaith attitudes, we used a concept called pluralism orientation, which basically meant students' positive engagement with religion and worldview difference. And then another important concept was called appreciative attitude. So that was students' attitudes to those representing religion and worldview perspectives that differed from theirs. So named groups, so attitudes to atheists, Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, and religious people in general. So there, on the slide at the bottom, there's an example of a pluralism orientation question. We had lots of different questions for these different measures. But to give you an overview, and the full details are in the report. But the first finding was a really positive one. So in terms of their pluralism orientation, 87% of students scored high. Now that's a really high percentage of students, and we've done a similar survey. Some questions similar, some of them are different. Of university students in the UK, that was a much larger survey of sort of 4,500 or so. And in that study, we found that just below 40% of university students were high scorers. Now that's interesting because it shows, therefore, that religious college students are scoring much more highly. So it suggests that rather than religious colleges being religious enclaves where people don't engage across difference, they actually show very, very good evidence of positive engagement with different religions and worldviews. Now, you may not be surprised by that because you are associated with a college, a religious college yourself, but I think a lot of outsiders are surprised because, as we've seen with the debate about faith-based schools, there's an assumption that single faith environments are bad for social cohesion or interfaith relations, but our data suggests this is not true. Next slide, please. So first measure was pluralism orientation. The next measure of attitudes was appreciative attitudes. So we asked to what extent students agreed that Buddhists, atheists, Christians, Hindus, Jews, Muslims, and Sikhs contribute to society, are ethical people, are people who have things in common with the student, and are people towards whom the student has a positive attitude. So different questions on each of those things, and they would indicate how far they agreed. And again, students scored highly in appreciation of all those different named religious groups. Levels of appreciation of Christians were highest, followed by Jews, then Muslims. And students across both colleges were least appreciative of atheists, which was interesting. But there were some differences. So levels of appreciation were higher in Christian colleges than in Muslim colleges towards Jews and towards Hindus. And Muslims appreciated Christians more than Christians appreciate Muslims. Now, why was something we asked and we pondered, and we don't fully know the answer to this, but we can make some educated guesses. So we think partly it's theological, that Christian students might be more appreciative of Jews because they see continuity in their religious histories because of the shared sacred text, the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament, and its depiction of the Jews as God's chosen people. Islam came after Christianity, so Muslims may similarly appreciate Christianity, seeing its sacred texts as the foundation for some of the Quran. And within the Islamic tradition, the concept of Ahlul Kitab, people of the book, is key. But we think global religious conflicts may also be playing a role. So perhaps appreciation of Jews was lower in Muslim colleges because our student survey was completed during the escalation of the Israel-Palestine conflict just after 7th of October 2023. Muslim students' lower appreciation of Hindus might have its roots in relations between Hindus and Muslims after the 1947 partition of India and Pakistan, and we reflect on those themes in greater detail in the project report. I'd be interested in your views about this as well. Next slide, please. Now that's our attitudes. What about their activity? What do they do to forge interfaith learning or interfaith relations? Now, excuse the size of the chart, it's quite small. So essentially, these are types of interfaith activity and the percentage of students who said they'd done them during college. So the first 3 rows are informal activities, so socializing with somebody of a different religious perspective. Then in the middle, the largest group are formal interfaith activities, like attending a debate between people of different worldviews. And then the final group at the bottom are curricula. So, for instance, enrolled in a course designed to enhance knowledge of different religious traditions. And we're looking at the percentage of Muslim students in red and the percentage of Christian students in purple who have done those since starting college. So you can see some similarities and also some differences. So during college, around 6 in 10 students reported doing informal activities. And fewer students had engaged in formal or curricular interfaith, but with one exception. Around 3/4 had discussed religious diversity in one or more modules. So students engage in similar ways, but Muslim students are somewhat more engaged in formal interfaith, we found, whereas Christians are very slightly more engaged informally and via the curriculum. And students studying and living in college report doing more formal interfaith activity than online students. Also, students training to be faith leaders were more likely to do interfaith activities, perhaps because they're preparing for when they will need to do this after graduation. Next slide, please. Now, to give you a bit more in the way of voices rather than just statistics, we found in some of the interviews, as well as in the written sort of free responses written in the survey, that for students, their relationships outside college with friends and family were really, really important. So for instance, this student that I interviewed at the Anglican College talked about her non-Christian friends. And a Sunni Muslim student from the college we called Muslim College A said, my friend who is Hindu, we've had lengthy conversations about our religions and the differences and similarities. It's not just him telling me how much he knows about Islam. I'm also asking questions about his faith. So that's quite a nice example. And then on the right is an example from another Sunni Muslim student who explained how in her country of origin, before migrating to Britain, interfaith was a more organic day-to-day experience within families who would often comprise members of different faiths. So she said, in my country, the way we deal with non-Muslims and all that is way different from here. In my family, we have non-Muslims. My aunt is Christian, so we're very, very into each other. It wasn't even anything until I came here. And then it's like, oh, there's something here and I see the divide. I still have a lot of family members that are not Muslim, so it wasn't a big deal. So it's interesting and kind of depressing to me that, you know, it was coming to the UK that made her feel, oh dear, there's a problem, there's a divide. People don't naturally relate well to each other. Next slide, please. So we've learned some quite positive things about students' interfaith attitudes. We've learned also some of the activities they're involved in. And I'm pleased to say that we have evidence that these interfaith activities that they do positively affect students' interfaith attitudes. So this chart basically shows that as the amount of interfaith activity students do increases, so do their pluralistic attitudes. And here informal interfaith activity was key. So the more informal interfaith activity students had done in college, the greater their appreciation of other groups. So if you look at the green bars, they are the appreciation and level of students who did the highest amount of interfaith activity. So they show much higher levels of appreciation than the students who had low or no levels of informal activity. So blue is the no informal, and then the red is the kind of midway low level. So it does make a difference. Next slide, please. That's the stats. And again, now here are the voices. So another way of looking at the impact college has on attitudes is by asking students directly. So here are some of the things they said about how their attitudes had changed. And almost all the changes were positive. Students reported becoming more open-minded, respectful, growing in goodwill towards other faiths. They understood the commonalities and differences between faiths better. So, for instance, the students in the bottom quote here talks about seeing Jews and Muslims as cousins. So this first student says, I was resentful about how to interact with people of non-religious beliefs. And then I met many who inspired me in my studies, regardless of their interest in religion. I learned a lot from and about them and felt overwhelmed to meet them. And then the quote here, relating Jews and Muslims as being cousins. So this is a Christian student talking about how that she has a deep respect for Jews and Muslims, Judaism being the faith of Jesus. So again, coming to that back to that point about they see there's this continuity whilst I find some aspects of Islamic practice deeply moving. I see Jews and Muslims as cousins, although I'm cautious because many may not feel that way. Next slide, please. Now, as well as seeing other faiths more positively, there was growth in understanding of commonalities and differences. So as this Christian said, whereas before I began training, I was more focused on the commonalities. I'm now more content to proclaim that there are differences in world religions, rather than the surface level comments, we're all the same, it's the same God, etc. Instead, I may say, let's look at the differences in what God is to me, a Christian, and to you, a Muslim. Not be afraid of having those open conversations. And they also talked about how building relationships with people in college who thought differently helped them understand others and build relationships with them. As you can see in the second quote, this male Protestant Christian talks about how the course had caused me to question a lot of the assumptions I've had through interacting with people of different denominations and emphases to mine. I see the immense value in dialogue. Next slide, please. Now, the mechanism for change is an interesting question, or how the students perceive what their students think has been the mechanism for change. So, for instance, a module on interfaith, class discussions, placements, or living with people of other faiths. Classroom is really important, and I would say, particularly in Muslim colleges, when lecturers create what one Christian called a space for respectful disagreement in class, it helps students positively engage with religious diversity. And you can see some of these shorter comments here. So Q&As, public lecture series, in-class discussions, interfaith module, a module on Islam for a Christian student. Next slide, please. Now, some students pointed out that the increase in positive attitudes to other faiths had paralleled an increasing understanding of and commitment to their own faith. So underscoring Diana Eck's point that pluralism does not require relativism. Diana Eck, now Professor of Comparative Religion and Indian Studies at Harvard, started the Pluralism Project 30 years ago. And she defines pluralism as an ethic for living together in a diverse society, not mere tolerance or relativism, but real encounter of commitments. And it's a helpful definition because it implies that to do interfaith, the person doesn't need to become a relativist, saying there's no such thing as truth or that all religions are equally true. Some people who support interfaith are relativists or universalists, but it's possible for somebody to believe their religion is the one true one and be committed to interfaith work. So for Eck, pluralism is the encounter of commitments about people who have many different beliefs encountering each other. Next slide, please. Now, in the case study research at the 4 colleges, we found some students were unsure about how interfaith fits with their desire to share their own faith with others. At Christian colleges, evangelism was important, particularly at the Evangelical College, where students did outreach activities in the local community. But it featured in both Christian colleges. In contrast, in the 2 Muslim colleges, Dawa, in other words, invitation or proselytizing within the Islamic tradition, that wasn't as prominent, and that was interesting. Now, it might be because Muslims see religious colleges as places for academic rigor, in contrast to Dawah, which they see as an activity done by other Muslims who have kind of charismatic skills, or by groups like Salafis who prioritize it. And again, I'd be interested to hear your views on why there might be this difference here. This is a quotation from an interview with a Christian lecturer at the Evangelical College when asked about the student interest in interfaith. And she explains that interfaith is either seen as a means to evangelism or it's seen as a social justice issue. They see that it's important to work across faiths in order to address humanitarian issues. And one of the recommendations that I'll mention later is that colleges consider how to help students connect or balance sharing their faith with developing interfaith understanding, that students should be helped to see the interrelationship between developing interfaith understanding and sharing their faith. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on now to the climate or the environment of the college and the role it plays. It plays an important role in students' interfaith learning. So aspects of a college's climate tend to lead to growth or decline in interfaith learning. And again, going back to our university study, we found some really compelling evidence there that what is really important for students' interfaith learning is having safe spaces and having opportunities for provocative encounters. So it's this combination. Students need space to express their religion and spirituality and opportunities to critique and challenge their worldviews. So having this combination of safe spaces and provocative encounters helps them develop more positive attitudes to those who are different. And both of those happened at religious colleges at higher levels than at universities. So suggesting again that religious colleges may be more effective than universities in creating an environment for interfaith learning. Next slide, please. But while that's the positives, there are also some challenges. So there are some things that are obstructed, some kinds of students who find it more challenging to learn about interfaith. So 6 in 10 students agreed that the college is a welcoming place for people of different religious and non-religious perspectives. But when we consider students' perceptions of their own college as a welcoming place for different groups, then things are a bit more complicated. So here we see the responses of Christian students about their college in blue, and the responses of Muslim students in red. So we asked if they agree that their college is welcoming to atheists, to religious people, to Buddhists, etc. in turn. And then what we see is quite a difference. You see that Christian college students were much less sure that their college was welcoming to other groups than Muslim college students were. So why is there this difference? Well, again, we're not fully sure. We have some ideas. It might be the reality that Muslim colleges are keener to welcome outsiders than Christian colleges, maybe because they're aware of what it is to be a minority in society. So they know that welcoming others is important. Second, we think it might be that Muslim students want to present their colleges to a national research project in a positive light, as welcoming, to help their colleges present themselves positively to outsiders. And this wouldn't be surprising given the level of suspicion that Muslims have found themselves under in recent years. And third, maybe Muslim colleges have more positive attitudes to other faiths than Christian colleges, or are more interested in interfaith engagement. But that's the looking at it from the Muslim colleges side. But looking at it from the Christian colleges side is another interesting question. And I've presented it to a number of Christian colleges, and I don't think anyone's really sure why it is that Christian colleges seem so much less welcoming. No one is quite sure. And again, I'd be interested to hear any views that you have on this issue. Next slide, please. Now, continuing on challenges, aspects of the college climate that contribute to decline in interfaith learning include coercion, so feeling pressure to hide or change your religion, insensitivity, so reading or hearing insensitive comments, about your worldview, and then also negative interfaith engagement. so difficult interactions around interfaith. So did these affect college students? Well, mostly not, but as the chart shows, the students studying online, so the green bars, are much more likely to avoid experiencing the negative aspects of college climate than those living in college. So putting it the other way around, the students living in college are more likely to experience the negative aspects of the college climate. So that's really interesting, isn't it? Because there must be something about living in proximity to people and engaging face to face that means there's more likely to be some obstacles to interfaith learning. And again, students who are studying full time also experience the negative aspects more. Next slide, please. Now, on the topic of relationships in college, we also considered intra-faith learning. So that's linked to interfaith learning because it's about recognizing the legitimacy of different beliefs. And we found that more than 8 in 10 students agreed they were learning to recognize complexity and diversity within religious traditions. But it's not an easy process. So next slide, please. We uncovered some contentious issues, the role of women and sexuality. And when students feel personally affected by these issues, for instance, if they're women or if they identify themselves as non-heterosexual, they find this difficult. But the way colleges dealt with these topics enabled students to develop skills that are useful for interfaith learning. So students gain in intra-faith learning, and this supports their interfaith learning. So we would recommend that colleges use those issues as opportunities for provocative encounters to help students develop both sets of skills. And the point was also made by one of the college principals we interviewed, whose words are on the slide. So he worked at a college that believed that women should be able to be ordained in the Anglican Church. And I think a lot of the people in the college also thought that, but he said that we have to tolerate people who don't believe in that. I think the fact that we've done that already in our own house, in a sense, means we might be able to engage with conversations with neighbours in other houses. And that was quite a nice image, I think. Okay, next slide. So moving towards a conclusion, we would argue that religious colleges are very fruitful contexts for interfaith learning. And in addition to what I've presented, in our second survey, we asked students to what extent they agreed that based on my experience of college, I'm more open to learning about other religions and worldviews. And we found that 2/3, well, 69%, so just over 2/3 of them agreed. Next slide, please. And we end the report, as I will do this presentation, with some recommendations. Now, these on the slide are some sort of shorter versions of the recommendations. You can find more details and more practical examples in the report. But we encourage colleges to provide interfaith opportunities. We give examples of things they can do, and we emphasize the importance of informal opportunities, which seem to make the most positive difference to students' interfaith learning. Next slide, please. Our recommendations also involve considerations of the college climate, of teaching strategies, and of balancing sharing one's faith with developing interfaith learning. And then finally, and this is a bit of an advertisement, we recommend the establishment of a religious colleges interfaith network. So some of the colleges we spoke to said they would be interested in connecting with another college, but they didn't have the contacts to do so. So we thought a network would facilitate that. So if anybody is interested in being involved or getting their college involved, please give me your email address. I can put my email address in the chat, and then we'll be in touch if there's enough interest. I've probably got interest now from about 8 colleges so far. So I think that's promising, and I'm hoping that the numbers are going to rise. Next slide, please. So that is the end now of my talk, and I would love to hear any questions and comments, and then I will also write my details in the chat, as well as writing a link to the report so that you can download it. I've got a strange email address with letters and numbers in it, but that is me. And I'll just put my name after that so you can remember. So anyone let me know if you're interested in that network.
Thank you so much for this, Professor. I am greatly honored to have you here. I mean, this is an incredible research that you carried out. 437 students, 58 colleges, to do such extensive work. 49 Christian and 9 Muslim colleges, and carry out the 34 interviews and so on. It's huge, and we are greatly delighted to have you here to present the work. And as I've already expressed my interest in joining the network, and I'm sure
you have, and you are on my list.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure.
Thank you so much.
So, can I ask those present to ask questions? You can unmute yourself, ask your question, and then mute yourself again, so that you don't have an echo that sometimes comes about when there's too many unmutes around. Thank you so much, and I would like to take this time also to thank TM for her time to manage the presentation for us. Thank you so much. All the best. Yeah. So please unmute yourself, ask the question, and then mute yourself. Thank you. You don't need to put your hand up. You just you can go ahead and do it, please. And I know there's one request already. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks very much for the presentation. I guess my question really was this. Did you ask any questions of the participating students about the character of their religious faith? That's to say, in listening to what you had to say, it struck me that one could well expect that there might be some differences between people who were conservative in their interpretation of their faith, or very liberal in their interpretation of their faith, both in terms of Muslim students, but also Christian students.
Thank you for the question. Yes, it's quite difficult to, well, if you're doing stats, it's quite difficult to come up with a question that all students will sort of understand, that will map on to your perception of kind of what is conservative, what is liberal. Because if you, one student's liberal is another student's conservative as well. So sometimes you can sort of try to get at those things, certainly within Christianity, is by asking about denomination. So, are they Roman Catholic? Are they Methodist? Are they Anglican, etc.? But then that often doesn't show it either, because there's a huge diversity within those traditions. So in short, no, we didn't. But I think we didn't do it because it's quite difficult to do it. Now, we can, to some extent, try and discern those things by looking at their responses to some of the questions about interfaith. So, you might assume, for example, that somebody that was very committed to evangelism was probably not going to believe that that all religions were equally the way to God. And sometimes you can pick that out through the interview responses. And certainly in the Evangelical College, I would say it did seem that when students were doing interfaith, sometimes it was a way of evangelism for them, because they thought my main priority is evangelizing. So how do I do that? Well, I need to meet people of different views. So I meet non-religious people, you know, by going out and doing outreach activities, but I also maybe would meet Muslims and I would try to tell them about Christianity. So no, we didn't, essentially, but that's because it's very difficult to ask a question that actually gets at that adequately, I think.
There is a question that you need. It's a long question. I'm not going to be able to read it. It's in the chat. Can I refer you to have a look at this, please?
Mm. Mm. Oh, I think that's wonderful. I think that's a brilliant reflection. Thank you. I have no response other than to say that thank you for sharing it. I don't think there's a question in there, is there?
I agree. It's just a comment that.
Yeah.
Any other? Yeah, there's another question by Professor Paya, I think. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for your very informative talk.
You're welcome.
My question is whether you have done any follow-up of your fantastic survey in the following sense. I am not quite sure what happens to people when they leave college and that environment. So as you know, in medicine, they do follow-up surveys. So when people are, say, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I wondered whether you have done that, or do you have any plan to do that? Because it would be nice to see whether the impact of education or that friendly environment has remained. Okay, thank you so much for that.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right that it would be wonderful to do a longitudinal survey. No, well, I mean, first it's too early because we only did the research. Well, we did the survey academic year 2023 to 2024, so it's a year ago essentially. But no, we don't. We generally with ethics procedures nowadays, they kind of ask you to collect the minimum amount of information. So it's not so recommended now to sort of say, can you give me your email address and then I may contact you in the future in 5 years if I get funding for another study. So no, we didn't do that. We are thinking about the future in terms of, well, actually in several ways. But in terms of the university study that we did a few years ago, as I mentioned, we did quite a large survey of 4,500 university students 1 year, and then we revisited it the next year. And then of those 2 sets of 4,500, they were mostly different people, apart from there was 1,000 who were the same people, and they belonged to a panel that belonged to the Market Research Association called Savanta Youth Site. So they're people that have signed up to their surveys panel and that they're willing to do surveys, you know, whenever. I think they get some shopping vouchers or something like that for that. So we sort of paid them to do it for us through our research grant. So we would be able to go back to those people, and we have had discussions in our research team about writing a funding application to then try to go back to those people and see what's happened to the 1,000 after university, but not for the colleges. But no, I do agree it would be really, really good and really helpful to do that. I mean, in terms of impact from the projects as well, one thing, in addition to the Religious Colleges Interfaith Network, which I hope will come out, the other thing is that we have been approached by the Wolf Institute that my colleague Lucy Peacock has now moved to work for. One of her colleagues is putting in a funding proposal to improve the University of Cambridge theological federations colleges, because there's about sort of 7 or 8 of these colleges that are in Cambridge, or that they kind of work together in some ways. and they want to improve their work on interfaith. So they're wanting to have a roundtable. We present the findings, and then they talk to staff and students at the college about how they can actually respond to some of these recommendations and change some of their practice. So that's a really good other thing that's happened as a result. And yes, and I'm really happy that you saw the 400 as a really good number. I mean, in a way we were surprised. In a way we thought we would receive more, but we found quite quickly that colleges were actually smaller than we thought they were. So if you look at websites, often colleges look like they've got hundreds of students, but then you contact them and you discover that actually they only have 50 students. So actually 437 is actually a really good number. But we initially were a little bit disappointed because we thought there would be larger numbers of students. But thank you for your questions. They're very important.
Thank you so much. I wonder whether I could follow that question up with another one.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Two related questions. First, you didn't tell us anything about the criteria which you put in place in order to make sure that the answers you receive are more or less genuine and they are not playing to the gallery. I mean, the respondents.
Sorry, could you say the last thing again? That they're genuine and they're not?
So my question was whether your criteria concerning if you like, accurateness of the responses and the sincerity of the respondents. So they are not, if you like, playing games or wearing masks. So number one. Number two, have you compared your survey with any possible similar surveys in other European countries? My interest is to see how much pluralism can be detected there, because Britain is known to be more tolerant in comparison to many other countries. So it would be nice to compare the results of your survey with possibly similar surveys done in other countries to see what are the similarities and differences. Thank you.
Yes. So on the first one, it's very difficult because, I mean, we can't know, because it was an online survey, so we can't know whether they're telling the truth or whether they're being overly optimistic or whether they're trying to present their colleges in a particular way. We had no reward attached to the survey. So, well, attached to the first survey anyway, there was no reward. There was an Amazon voucher offered for the second survey because we were told that because we were doing it towards the end of an academic year when students were handing in assignments, that people thought that they would be less likely to have time to fill it in. So our steering group recommended that we offer an Amazon voucher as in a sort of draw. So we then gave that out to 4 people selected at random. So there was, some kind of incentive. The second time, not the first one. So, but yes, it may well be that people who decided to do it were more interested in interfaith. So it might be that the people who were not interested and not committed to interfaith didn't do the survey. Hello, sorry. Okay, I think that was I just heard something, but I'm not sure what it was. So yes, it's possible but that happens in any kind of survey research, I think. So I think it's difficult to get away from that. The fact that it was mostly done via the principals and the colleges. We did do some social media as well to pick up any additional students, but the majority we got via the colleges. I think we felt that during the interviews, perhaps there was, and I think I felt that certainly in going to one of the Muslim colleges, that perhaps students seemed very, very keen to present their college in a positive light. And I did reflect on whether it was because, you know, my identity as a white Christian researcher would have had some kind of impact on that, that they were wanting to counter any misinformation that they thought I might come with as a non-Muslim, but I don't know. We can only reflect, and we do actually in the report. You might want to read. We have an appendix when we reflect on the methods and the things that work well, the things that were challenges. But yes, as to the survey, similar surveys in other European countries, I'm afraid that I have not been able to find any. So we're currently writing a journal article about how religious colleges help students develop appreciative attitudes. So that's looking at their interview answers to one specific question. I've been doing a literature review as part of that about what else has been done. And there's very, very little. I mean, it's possible that there's stuff I just haven't found, or because it's written in a different language. And if you have any references, please, please send them to me. But yeah, there's, you know, almost nothing. There's some in the US, there's some of these larger surveys, like the Ideal Study, have also included some religious colleges, so we're able to look at that literature. And then there are some smaller qualitative studies of sort of single colleges. For example, there's a journal published called Christian Higher Education, which, you know, obviously is about Christian colleges, and there are a couple of articles there. But yeah, very little. So I think we need more, and I think it's an area that's been rather neglected.
Thank you. Any more questions by anyone else? I have a question personally, but I just see if anyone else has. Please unmute yourself if you have a question and ask your question. We have a few more minutes. I was going to ask you myself, based on the presentation, do you foresee, I have two questions mainly. Do you foresee, having visited those colleges and talked to the students, an interest in the management of those institutions to work together with another institution of a different faith? That's all. That's number one. And number two, can you see within the structure of teaching at those institutions an instance where students of a different faith institution would be invited or would be involved in their teaching of a particular module or a particular aspect of in order to enrich the syllabus, basically, and the delivery of the syllabus that they are working.
I think both of those are very important questions. The first one is the management interested? I think there is a sense in which, and maybe I know this more about the Christian sector, that colleges feel under certain pressures around recruiting enough students every year, you know, in order to fund the salaries of their staff. I think the Christian sector is facing some decline. You know, we know about the decline in church going, and I think that's affecting the numbers of students who study at those colleges. And in fact, during the research, we saw, I think it was 2 or 3 colleges closed during that year, where we started with, you know, this database of these are the colleges we're going to contact. And then we were having some difficulties with some colleges, nobody replying, and then found out that was actually because they were closing. So I think that's an issue in the Christian sector. May also be an issue in the Muslim sector as well, not in the sense of decline, but just in the sense of there are so many pressures. There are so many things that you have to do, you know, to satisfy the universities that validating you, to manage the finances of the staff, the governance, etc. But having said that, I think that there is interest as well. So the principals or the senior leaders and lecturers that we interviewed were interested. I mean, also there's the issue that Professor Pyer brought up, that of course, you know, maybe maybe students are, maybe the people who reply are the ones who are interested. So, you know, we did contact, I'm trying to remember exactly how many, but we contacted several colleges to ask if we could do case studies there, who said no. And I don't know why they said no, but it's probably, you know, something around they felt they didn't have time to do that on top of everything else, because it would require work. They would have to contact students, have a conversation in staff meeting, and if they're very busy, they don't have time. So I think it's varied. I think some management are very interested, some are less interested. There might be an individual who's the champion of interfaith, and then the others are not so bothered, or, you know, most of them could be on board. So it depends. Oh, I would absolutely love to have seen an example of students from different colleges meeting. We didn't see that. We heard some wonderful examples of placements, where this was generally when students were training to be a religious leader and they were going to other places of worship, and just gaining this deep respect for the other faith that they saw represented there and that they met. And these examples of hospitality, actually, from mosques, that they were really touching to the Christian students. There were examples of lecturers from other faiths coming in to modules, or teaching, or doing a Q&A session, you know, a bit like this kind of thing. There were examples of that, but not really of students coming into each other's classrooms. And I think that could just be a wonderful thing. And that's behind the idea of the Religious Colleges Network, that, you know, maybe you can spend a day and you can all have lunch together. And I think there's appetite from the students. Several of the students we interviewed said that would just be wonderful. We would just love to meet students from other faiths. You know, it doesn't need to be a scary thing, because it can feel, you know, like maybe I'll say the wrong thing because I'm ignorant about this other faith, but it doesn't need to be that. But when people are meeting face to face, it has a massive impact.
I totally agree, and I hope that maybe in future that would be part of the work that we do. Any questions by anyone? Can I just urge anyone who has any more questions before we? Oh yeah, Dr. John Gear has got a question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor On. I don't know if you hear me and see me.
I can hear you. Hello. Yes.
Hello. How are you? Yeah.
I'm very well.
Thank you very much. I missed a few minutes of the first part of your talk. But I'm sure I would go back again to the talk and I would listen to all of it once again. Just wanted to, it's not a question, it's more of a comment. Just wanted to thank you. I genuinely believe this is a very valuable initiative. I've been myself involved in interfaith initiatives in the UK and a few more other countries. I've spent some time with Christians and other faiths, mainly with the Christians. I do strongly believe that it comes with a lot of positive things. I do agree with you that sometimes, you know, some Muslims may have the intention of having da'wah, or even sometimes some evangelical intentions among the Christians. But the dialogue itself is so important, which I think we need to work more towards that. Yeah. I just wanted to make a few more suggestions, if possible.
Yes, lovely.
Maybe if you can extend your research by taking it basically to wider contexts of the higher education providers, not only the Muslim or Christian colleges, but also to other universities, normal universities, and maybe having one initiative similar to what you said, that, you know, we can have a forum or a network, maybe a name being known as Interfaith Dialogue. Sometimes these dialogues can be focused on working on the commonalities, sometimes even not necessarily working on the commonalities. I've seen in most of these interfaith initiatives that we try to just confirm each other, just just to focus on the commonalities.
Yes.
Which is good, but it doesn't need to be that. Sometimes it can be very deep academic discussions and dialogues and sitting, and sometimes, as we say, it's agree to disagree and to find even the similarities and also the similarities, and then. But that itself is just to learn from each other, just to learn the commonalities and also learn the differences and see basically all aspects of these interrelations of all these faith traditions and faith communities. I think that itself is very valuable, and that has to be appreciated. As the principal of the college, I have always supported interfaith initiatives, and I have always wanted to have, we try to have at least once a year, sometimes even more than in the Christmas times, Easter times, to have some interfaith initiatives. We have tried to incorporate some modules for the students on how to be more familiar with the world religions. We have a lesson, and Dr. Misbahi himself has taught a few times Abrahamic faith. He has invited few people from other faiths communities to come and to present. So not only it could be taught by Muslims, but also it can be taught by other. Also, we do have other modules for this. I think that if we can even take it ahead and see it as a more general, and even suggested, I don't know, to the Department of Education, that's a day, or I don't know, an initiative can be marked as the academic interreligious interfaith day or talk or initiative. So because many students who go to these normal universities, not necessarily to Christian or Muslim colleges, they go to normal universities, but they're Christians or Muslims, or they may not basically be of any of these faiths, but they might be interested in knowing about these faiths and being part of the interfaith and dialogues, specifically if it's really academic, if it's really beneficial. So this is my suggestion, that if you can take it ahead by suggesting to the higher sectors like the education sector, the Department of Education, other places, that maybe we can have some support from that side as well. So it wouldn't be only a research done by an organization. I'm not too familiar with your organization, but I think this is another step which could be probably taken ahead.
Yes, I agree. I don't have contacts at the Department for Education, but I think that's a brilliant idea. I know that universities for some years have supported Interfaith Week, which of course was an initiative of the Interfaith Network, which sadly lost its funding from the government a year or two ago. But Interfaith Network had become, the Interfaith Week had become quite an important feature in the calendar of lots of universities, and had done really great work to improve interfaith relations. Otherwise, we find, and I've done quite a lot of previous research on universities, but we find pockets of brilliance where there'll be an interfaith initiative. For example, charities like the Faith and Belief Forum, based up in North London, they have a scheme called Parliamentors, where they work in about 10 universities, including Coventry, actually, Birmingham, Nottingham, and they get together an interfaith group of students who are mentored by a local MP in a social action project. And part of it is social action, but part of it is also about building these really deep interfaith relationships. But that's only in 10 universities, and there are sort of 140 or so on there. And then sometimes you'll get a wonderful student who is inspired and will bring others together and will say, you know, for example, let's get the ISOC together with the Christian Union, and they'll have a great debate or a great meeting. But it does depend on individual students often, and there isn't that kind of national level resourcing. For that, there used to be, actually, about sort of 15 years ago, the National Union of Students, which historically had been very secular and not really very interested in faith. They then appointed an interfaith officer, and she was working in lots of universities. So these sorts of things, and there was also an organisation called the Lapai Foundation, run by Gwen Griffith Dixon. So these things sort of come up and they do great work for a few years and then they sort of seem to disappear again. But you know, any initiative is wonderful. But I think it's right that I think it's true that we can't just depend on the students to organise it, because students are very transient. They'll be at the college for a couple of years and then they'll go, and then if they go, then the activity tends to sort of die as they leave. So you need some kind of way of really establishing something within the university as a whole. And some places that is there and it's really good, and there's a great chaplain that's championing it as well, and chaplains are really, really important in Interfaith. So yeah, I mean, I guess I would say I think Interfaith does happen in all universities. Sometimes it's informal, sometimes it's formal, but I fully agree with you that to have something annual day, something like that would be much would be a great way of getting it on people's priority list, because it often slips off under other priorities.
Okay, we have one question typed up in the chat. If you could have a look, Professor.
Oh yes. Oh yes. What specific services or resources is that my institution or is that the Islamic College?
It is yours, I presume they're asking.
I mean, we don't have any specific services or resources to help connect with and learn from other interfaith organizations. So we are a research center, the Center for Peace and Security, which is interdisciplinary. So it has scholars from politics, sociology, a couple from Islamic studies, geography, etc. We do not provide sort of specific resources other than obviously the wealth of research that we've done on, you know, issues from migration to human security. My colleague Saria Sharuvalil Contractor, who was one of the researchers on this project, she is also connected with a interfaith initiative called, let me get the name right, I think it's called United Religions Initiative, and they recently had a big conference in Coventry. So, and then obviously we're starting up this network, which we would see as a way of helping colleges connect and learn from other interfaith organizations. But otherwise, you know, I think to go back to the Interfaith Network, they were a really fantastic national association that brought together all these interfaith groups, and you could go on their website and find out wherever your local area was, what was going on. The website still exists, so you can go there, but they're not kind of a contact point in the way that they used to be to facilitate that. So that there is a little bit of a gap, I would say, now. But thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. I would like to. Oh, there's one more question, one more message. Oh, just thank you. I would like to thank you for the time you've allocated to this presentation. I would like to thank all those who joined, and some have left, but everyone who has participated in this debate. And I can see you've left in the chat section, you have actually given the address for people who want to join the group, in a sense, and you've also given your own email in case they want to email you regarding the work and look at this research and read it and so on. The link to the research is also there. Thank you for that. Anything else you want to add, Professor?
No, I would just like to say thank you for your continuing support and all the work that you do on Interfaith. I think it's really great. I will be in touch. It might be a month or so. I'm still gathering names and emails. They're coming in slowly. But yes, we will be in touch about the network. It will probably start as an email list or something like that, something quite humble. But from small beginnings can become great things. So thank you for organising this talk. I really appreciate such thoughtful organisation as well as comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. All the best.
All the best.
See you
Bye-bye.
next week. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.